This young man has decided to drop his studies in order to work as a taxi driver and support his family. One morning, Young Min starts cleaning the car he uses and finds a mysterious phone. He assumes one of his clients has lost it, but when he tries to turn it on, the phone unleashes a wave of energy that truly shocks him. Young Min drops the phone but picks it up again full of curiosity. Right then, a man approaches him and discloses that he is a representative of the bank. He informs Young Min that his parents owed 300 million won to the bank. The boy has to pay the first 30 million won this month or else the bank will seize his house. The boy starts his shift that night with the intention of working every single day of this month to collect the money. His first riders are some female actresses in white dresses and weird makeup. The actresses want to go to the cemetery for a film shoot. After he gives them a lift, another girl in a white dress appears in the cab. Young Min believes she is a friend of the actresses. The girl leaves the taxi by moving right through it. As she walks a bit farther, the girl is drawn back into the cab and floats into it. Young Min is so scared that he passes out. The girl moves out of the car again and wonders if she is dead. The girl, Ji-hyun, has no idea who she is or how she died. Young Min wakes up the next morning, but the girl is still in the cab. The boy runs away while Ji-hyun follows him, but she is drawn back into the car. Young Min is afraid to get back in the car. When a traffic officer appears, the boy politely asks him to check if there is anybody in the taxi. Since the officer does not see anybody, Young Min gets back into it only to see the ghost again. The two of them have a brief talk. Ji-hyun asks the boy if he killed her with his taxi and that's why she is trapped here. In fact, she found some blood in the back seat. However, Young Min proves to her that the blood is fake and it was spilled by the actresses last night. The boy wants to get rid of the girl but she can't go far. Apparently, there is a limit and she always floats back in the car. Whatever the case, Young Min still has to make money. He gets back to work but there is one problem. His clients get sick in the presence of the ghost and they don't want to ride with him. The cute ghost convinces Young Min to help her. So he makes a sketch of her and goes to the nearest police station, asking if they know of a girl like the one in the drawing who was involved in a car accident. When Young Min tells the officer that the girl could be anywhere between 20 and 40 years old, Ji-hyun tries to look herself in the mirror but she has no reflection since she is a ghost. Elsewhere, some homicide detectives are working on a case that involves Ji-hyun. Later that night, Young Min parks the taxi away from his house to make sure that the ghost can't follow him. His grandma, Bun-ja, is waiting for him, and the boy runs straight into her arms after the weird experience he has had today. While sleeping, Young Min has a strange dream, seeing Ji-hyun floating on top of him. He screams in fear, but his grandma wakes him up and he realizes it is morning already. Bun-ja wants him to give her a lift, and Young Min convinces her to sit on the back. Suddenly, Bun-ja starts feeling sick. Ji-hyun also speaks to Young Min, which makes him lose concentration and drive the car right on some garbage. After dropping his grandma off, Young Min takes the car to a temple, where two priestesses perform a ritual in order to cleanse the vehicle of any evil energy. However, the ghost is still there. That night, Young Min picks Dr. Do up in his taxi and drives him to the hospital. The doctor has no negative effects in the presence of the ghost. At the hospital, Young Min recalls how the doctor tried to save his mother's life when she had an accident. The boy even treats Do with some juices to show him how grateful he is for his help. Back home, the boy visits a forum to ask about ghosts. A user called Flower Medium replies to him saying that the gates are open and the ghosts are flowing into their world. The next day, Young Min gets back to work. At some point, he sees a man signaling him to stop. Surprisingly, this man can see both Ji-hyun and Young Min. The boy takes the ghost to a secluded location to have a talk with them. Ji-hyun argues with the other ghost, Byung-kol, telling him that she found Young Min first. Young Min decides to take him along for now, but when he tries to pick up a real human, the man can't even enter the taxi because his body starts hurting. That night, Young Min stares at a picture of his dead mother, wondering what he should do. The next day, he intends to sell his taxi and buy a new car, but that's until a third ghost appears and tells Ji-hyun that he has some golden jewelry in the back of his own former car. The ghost needs help to deliver the jewelry to his daughter and wife. Young Min helps him with that, and the man achieves catharsis, making the leap from this world to the next. Once he does, his daughter gives Young Min a golden ring, rewarding him for allowing her to see her father one last time. Back in the taxi, Byung-kol asks if they can help him as well. In fact, he can pay them for their help because he has some hidden pure gold in the house he used to live. He can guide Young Min to find it and keep it. Ji-hyun comes up with an idea, saying that they can be a taxi for ghosts. If the ghosts can pay them somehow, they can grant their wishes and help them leap to the next world. Young Min believes that they can give it a try. Byung-kol starts narrating that he died in a work accident 1 month after he got married to the love of his life, Yeon. Young Min drives him back home, where Byung-kol tells him that he had promised his wife he would install a bathtub for her but he never had the chance to do it. When Young Min sees Cole's wife walking by, he has a change of heart. He declares that this is a terrible idea and drives away with Ji-hyun. That night, the two of them start arguing about what they should do, but they are interrupted by Bun-ja. The grandma tells young Min that the sink is leaking again, so the boy proceeds to fix it. While he works on it, he recalls past memories of his mother giving him a bath. At the same time, Ji-hyun wanders around the house and observes the pictures of young Min with his family. She feels terrible because everybody has a story while she has no memories of her past. Considering his happy memories, young Min changes his mind and decides to help Byung-kol. When he drives back to his house with Ji-hyun, the ghost starts telling them the story of his relationship with his wife. They met when they started working at a coffee shop 8 years ago, and they grew really close since that day. Their best chance to get into the house is for young Min to pretend he is a cousin of Byung-kol. Of course, the ghost provides him with all the necessary information to make his performance convincing. Young Min knocks on Yeon's door and pretends that his cousin had told him about his plan to install a bathtub in their house. Out of respect for his cousin's memory, young Min wants to do the work and install the tub. Once the group is inside the house, young Min asks Yeon for some paperwork in order to distract her. Ji-hyun goes with her, while Byung-kol takes the boy to another bedroom in order to look for the gold. After some unsuccessful attempts, they finally find the gold hidden in the AC system. Ji-hyun starts screaming to inform them that Yeon is returning back to the living room, but young Min is already there. As they discuss, Yeon receives a phone call from Byung-kol's work, and young Min offers to give her a ride. At the same time, his grandma is visited by two detectives, Ji-chang and Taehyun, who ask her who drove the taxi back home the night when the boy's mother died. Grandma is not aware of that information and calls young Min to ask him about it. Surprisingly, the boy tells her he was not the one to drive the taxi back home. Young Min has to hang up as a lawyer from Byung-kol's former company appears. While the lawyer starts speaking with Yeon, two elderly people appear, claiming to be Byung-kol's parents. The ghost doesn't recognize them because his mother had abandoned him when he was a kid. However, the woman shows some paperwork to the lawyer, proving that they are indeed his parents. When Yeon has a private talk with her, the woman gives her a banking book. She claims she had opened a bank account for her son when he was a kid to deposit money for him, but later, the woman says that Byung-kol loved apricots, while the ghost reveals that he used to be allergic to apricots. The woman also finds out that Yeon has not published her marriage permit, a piece of information she uses to claim the company's refund for Cole's death. Yeon is naturally angry at her, but the woman says that she will share a big portion of the refund with her. As they ride their car later on, the elderly couple is revealed to be a pair of con artists. The woman reveals that she had spent some time with Byung-kol's real mother in prison, and that's how she became aware of him. Elsewhere, young Min takes Yeon home and then he drives back to his own house. The boy suspects that something is off with Byung-kol's supposed parents and he cites the example with the apricots. A real mother would never neglect something as important as a food allergy because the top priority of a mom is to keep her children safe. The next morning, young Min and Ji-hyun find the house where Cole's mother used to live. The boy guesses the door's pass, which is Cole's birthday, and he enters the house. He realizes he was right as he finds a picture of Cole's real mother with the con artist. When he shows this picture to Cole, the ghost recalls when his mother dropped him off at the orphanage. As a little kid, he had looked at her hand and he remembers that his mother had a mark on her right hand. Young Min meets with Yeon again to inform her about his suspicions. What they need to do now is to meet with the lawyer again and prove that the con artist is not Cole's real mother. Indeed, young Min sets up the meeting and the lawyer asks the woman to give him her fingerprint. The woman is reluctant to uncover her right hand, but young Min removes the glove she is wearing. However, that's not enough to prove anything to the lawyer, who gets her fingerprint. The lawyer comments that her fingerprint is faded, but the woman tells him that she has worked on tough jobs throughout her life, so that's why this is happening. The woman pretends she is insulted by everyone's distrust, so she removes a hair from her head and asks them to perform a DNA test on it. However, she also knows that they have nothing to compare her hair against, since Cole is now dead. Yeon passes out and she is taken to the hospital, where Do tells her that she is 3 months pregnant. When they meet down the hall with the woman again, young Min tells her that she made a mistake. The group is actually able to perform the DNA test by comparing the woman's hair to the baby's DNA. When the lawyer calls the elderly couple again, young Min bursts in with the proof that states she is not Byung-kol's mother. The woman wonders how they were able to do this, but young Min reminds her that he returned to this office after everyone left to retrieve her hair. The con artists can't do anything else to claim the money, and they start running away. Young Min runs after them, but the con artists manage to escape by navigating the hallways of the hospital. As they walk outside the hospital, the issue with the money has settled and Yeon is the one who will claim it. Young Min spends a moment alone with Ji-hyun, who is very proud of him. The two of them are attracted to one another and Ji-hyun suggests that they should at least give one another a high five. But as they try to do so, Ji-hyun floats right through him and stumbles on the ground. Young Min tries to give her his hand to pull her up, even though he knows he will be unable to touch her. As they extend their hands, Young Min realizes that Ji-hyun is wearing a bracelet that belonged to his mother. In any case, Ji-hyun has no idea how she acquired the bracelet. The two of them are interrupted by Yeon, who thanks Young Min for everything he did to help her. The taxi driver takes the woman back home, but he does not drive away as he sees that Yeon left Cole's old banking books in the car. Inside the house, Yeon is struggling against the con artists, who have come to get their revenge on her. Cole runs outside and informs Young Min about them. The boy runs back to her apartment, but the door is locked. Yeon pleads with the criminals not to hurt her because her baby will also be hurt. Nevertheless, the criminals threaten her with a knife. Young Cole becomes increasingly worried, but the more desperate he becomes, the more he tries to break the door's lock so Young Min can walk in. Eventually, he is able to break the lock even though his form is immaterial. Young Min runs inside and stops the criminals from hurting Yeon. The police arrest the scammers, and Yeon is free to go back to her old life. However, there is one more thing that Young Min has to do to make sure that this story has a happy ending. The young driver tells Yeon that Byung Cole is right there, present with them in the form of a ghost. Byung Cole starts speaking and Young Min delivers his word to his wife. Yeon is touched by his words as she recognizes that this must really be her husband. There is no way Young Min would know these details and talk about them. After delivering his final words to his wife, Byung Cole is free to make the leap from this world to the next. When Young Min returns to his house, he starts looking for the bracelet that he had given to his mother. His grandma sees him going through his mother's stuff and asks him about it. Young Min is looking for the bracelet because it was very special to him and his mother. He had added many little details to it in order to make it unique. Bunja grabs her phone and shows Young Min a few pictures of his mother wearing the bracelet. But one of those pictures is very unusual. The driver sees his mother in a selfie with Ji-hyun, which means that the two women used to know each other. When Young Min is alone with Ji-hyun, he asks her again about the bracelet. Sadly, the ghost has no memory of it, but she says that they need to investigate this clue. Maybe one clue will lead them to the next and she might be able to learn more information about herself. The next day while driving his taxi, Young Min receives a phone call from the two detectives investigating his mother's case. Now, we learn that his mother was killed and abandoned by a motorbike on the road. Young Min meets the detectives at a coffee shop, but he tells them that the store is cold due to the air conditioning, prompting them to go sit outside so that Ji-hyun can smell the awesome aroma of the coffee. Ji-chan wants to know what exactly happened that night and most importantly, why Young Min didn't take his mother's taxi. A flashback is triggered to show us what happened that night from Young Min's perspective. The boy was on the phone with his mother and they were making plans of eating together. Suddenly, Young Min heard some weird noises and his mother hung up. Then, Young Min started running until he found his mother. Dr. Do was on top of her and he was trying to save her until the ambulance arrived. Young Min couldn't mount the ambulance because there was not enough space for everyone. He thought of driving his mother's taxi to the hospital, but then he remembered that he should leave the scene as is for the police to examine. Back in the present, Young Min tells the detectives that he is annoyed by them. Instead of drinking coffee and asking stupid questions, they should do their job and find the person who ran over his mother. Right next, Young Min and Ji-hyun visit his mother's resting place, trying to figure out if there is something that could possibly serve as a lead. While they discuss, a strange man takes pictures of them from a safe distance. In the meantime, Bunja is worried about her grandson's personal life, so she decides to call a girl who likes him. That girl is So-ri, a young nurse who works in the Daehan hospital with Dr. Do. The grandma invites the girl over for a drink with her and her grandson, but So-ri is having a busy day. An injured man is brought into the hospital. Dr. Do initially stabilizes him, but then the man is in danger of dying. Do returns to the emergency room, pushes a male nurse aside, and tries to revive the man. Unfortunately, he has to announce to the man's relatives that he is dead. Later, Young Min picks up a passenger from the road. This young man has some supernatural powers. His eyes turn blue and he is able to see Ji-hyun. Young Min stops the car to have a talk with this man, who is revealed to be Flower Medium. The medium pulls a spell written on a yellow paper and tries to stick it on Ji-hyun's head, so he can get rid of her, but Young Min stops him. The medium tells him that he has no idea what he's doing. He should stay away from ghosts. But since Young Min is not convinced, the medium gives him a card before walking away. Then, Young Min and Ji-hyun find out that the ghost is not attached to the car but rather a phone. The young driver carries the phone away and the ghost is drawn to it, which launches her forward and brings her really close to Young Min. While the two of them can't stop thinking about one another, the phone's battery dies and the ghost disappears. Young Min tries to buy a charger but he can't find one. Next, he is distracted by multiple clients boarding his taxi and the night turns really profitable for him. In the meantime, Ji-hyun is trapped in a dark place that looks like some kind of a netherworld. The next morning, Young Min gives his grandma a ride and she notices this broken phone. Young Min tells her that it is not working, so the grandma takes it and disposes it into the recycle bin. Young Min can't stop her in time, but he also thinks that maybe he should go on with his life as a normal person. As the day progresses, everything reminds young Min of Ji-hyun, his ghost crush. Meanwhile, Ji-hyun is trapped in the netherworld. All of a sudden, she sees a woman with her baby appearing, but she disappears again. In the world of the living, young Min retrieves the phone from the recycle bin and he buys a charger for it. Then, he returns home and plugs the charger into the phone. The phone starts charging and Ji-hyun makes it back, landing in young Min's hands. Although the two of them know that a relationship between them would not work, they can't help but feel attraction for one another. But for now, all they can do is continue working on their little ghost business, granting the wishes of the ghosts and helping them achieve catharsis. One night, young Min picks up a ghost which has no money to pay for the ride. The ghost tries to escape, but Ji-hyun gets a hold of her. Since she has no money, this ghost introduces them to another ghost which is supposed to help them with their business. This other ghost takes them to a bus station in Seoul and tells that ghosts gather there during the day, which means that young Min can pick many of them and charge them for his services. The next day, Ji-hyun is very enthusiastic and they find lots of ghosts forming a line at the bus station. Ji-hyun speaks with some of them to hear their wishes until the ghost of a young man wearing glasses approaches her. This man is Sin-un, one of Ji-hyun's old college mates. The boy informs Ji-hyun about her real name and tells her that she was very cheerful back in college. Sin-un takes her and young Min to a store that used to belong to him, and shows her an old picture of theirs. In the picture, Ji-hyun recognizes the woman who she saw in the netherworld holding a baby. Sin-un informs her that this girl was Ji-hyun's best friend. Then, Sin-un helps young Min open a safe where he finds a stash of money. Sin-un wants him to keep the money and help him achieve his wish list in order to make the leap. Following, young Min takes Ji-hyun to her old school, where they find out that she used to be a martial arts champion. Later, the driver also visits the medium, buying a mirror which can reflect ghosts and asking him if ghosts can change clothes. Back home, they give it a try and Ji-hyun is able to change her outfit. As it appears, Sin-un is in love with Ji-hyun and he has a long wish list. First, he wants to go shopping with her and then he wants to watch a movie with her. Then, he wants to eat out with Ji-hyun. But since it would be weird for young Min to date an empty chair, he calls his grandma to help him eat the stuff he orders. While all of this plays out, young Min gets jealous. He also learns from Sin-un that if two ghosts fall in love, they will be able to move to the next plane of existence together. The last part of Sin-un's plan is to offer Ji-hyun a ring, so young Min proceeds to buy the ring for him. Confused with all of this, young Min decides to take some time off at a wellness center, but he stumbles on Flower Medium, who informs him that a ghost can make the leap if love grows into its heart. In the meantime, the police detectives meet with another police officer, Hyung-soo, who is also Ji-hyun's dad. The father informs the detectives that before she went missing, Ji-hyun was working on her best friend's case. Her best friend supposedly died in the emergency room, but his daughter believed that the woman and her baby were killed. Elsewhere, young Min spends some time with So-ri, but he can't force himself to feel anything about her. Eventually, young Min returns home and decides to take Ji-hyun to her old classmate. He allows the ghosts to have their moment and Sin-un tells Ji-hyun that they can move together out of this world. However, Ji-hyun does not love him, and this leap is not possible for her. At the same time, young Min regrets leaving them alone and he rushes back to them. As he arrives in the room, he sees Sin-un making the leap and he is afraid that Ji-hyun will leave forever. However, his ghost crush is still there because she does not love Sin-un. When they go outside, Ji-hyun messes up with him because he is apparently afraid to lose her. Young Min plays it cool and pretends that he didn't want her to go, because they have still lots of work to do to find out what happened to her. Soon, the two of them meet with the medium, hoping to get more information. The medium is about to stick a spell on the phone to which Ji-hyun is connected, but she is afraid of transitioning, so she screams and is able to blow the spell away from the medium's hands. Then, the medium tries hypnosis and brings some of Ji-hyun's old memories to the surface. Ji-hyun can see that she was investigating the case of her best friend's death. She sees that she cornered a private investigator about some pictures that he possessed. When she wakes up, she tags along with young Min and they visit the office of the private investigator. However, the office has been cleared and there is nobody in it anymore. The two of them have to deviate from their efforts for a little while when a kid enters their taxi asking for their help. Little Ha-jun has heard that this taxi grants wishes, so he wants young Min to help him find his sister. The boy is also able to see Ji-hyun even though he is alive. The team splits up, and Ji-hyun guides the boy into visiting several stores and asking questions about his missing sister. In the meantime, So-ri witnesses an illegal act when she sees a male nurse, Kim Jong, stealing some drugs from the hospital. She tells Do about it and the doctor calls another nurse, Kim Hyun, to to bring him some statistics. After reviewing the stats, Du realizes that the number of deaths has increased after Kim Jong joined the hospital. The doctor sets up a trap and he records the male nurse stealing the drugs. Back to Young Min, he meets with a group of girls who knew the boy's missing sister, Ha-yeol. He is mostly interested in speaking with Ji-eun, a girl who used to work in the same grocery store as Ha-yeol. The girl recalls an incident when Ha-yeol helped her get out of trouble, but the rest of the girl group doesn't let her speak. A flashback reveals that this group of girls used to bully Ha-yeol into stealing cigarettes for them. In the present, Young Min approaches Ji-eun and prompts her to enter his taxi, which serves as a protected space for her. The leader of the bully girl group calls Ji-eun and threatens her not to talk. That night, Young Min is ambushed by a group of thugs. The girl bully has paid them to beat him up. Although they serve Young Min a beating, the police detectives are notified and they join the scene right on time to assist Young Min. After having his hand treated, Young Min continues searching for the missing girl. The police find her phone and say that the girl had left a goodbye message on it. Ji-hyun believes that this is a setup made by the people who probably murdered the girl. Ji-eun decides to speak up, and a flashback reveals that she and Ha-yeol decided to stand up to the bullies. However, the bullies attacked Ha-yeol and accidentally killed her. They covered her up and the leader of the bullies threatened everyone to stay silent, or else she will kill them as well. In the present, Ji-eun points Young Min in the right direction and he goes looking for the girl. At some point, he slips, and Ji-hyun is able to grab his hand and hold him. Eventually, they find the girl, who is still alive, and they take her to the hospital. At the hospital, the ghost of the girl appears to the group and thanks them for finding her. Everybody believes that the girl is dead, but when her ghost disappears, her soul actually returns to her body and she wakes. Her whole family thanks Young Min and the girl reconciles with Ji-eun. Another incident takes place in the hospital, where Kim Jong is fired and he tries to attack Du. However, Sori interrupts them and Kim Jong has no other choice but to leave. Young Min and Ji-hyun have an opportunity to relax and spend some time together. The two of them come closer, and they get their hopes up because Ji-hyun was able to materialize for a few seconds and grab his hand the previous night. When they get in the taxi, their faces come really close, but Ji-hyun recalls the words of her old classmate, who told her that she would be able to move on if she fell in love with Young Min. Ji-hyun realizes that if she falls in love with him, she will disappear, so she decides to pull back and keep a distance from him. Despite this, they decide to follow a local Korean tradition and lock a heart with their names at a special place. While they do so, they stumble on Du and So-ri. Ji-hyun recalls that she has been treated by this doctor in the past, so Young Min shows him the picture of his mother with Ji-hyun, asking him if he knows her. The doctor remembers that he has seen this girl in the past, but unfortunately, she is dead now. That night, Young Min does some online research for Ji-hyun, but he realizes that there are no social media accounts popping up with her name. The next morning, Young Min visits the police station and shows the same picture to the police detectives. The detectives are reluctant initially, but they eventually reveal to him that his mother knew Ji-hyun through a program called Cop Taxi, which used some taxis to transfer police officers. This means that Ji-hyun was a police officer. In the meantime, the male nurse returns to the hospital and he attacks Dr. Du. Although he manages to cut his arm, Kim Jong has to run away when security is called. Young Min pays another visit to the medium because he wants to ask him if it is possible for the ghosts to materialize. The flower medium tells him that it is impossible and prompts him to stop dreaming about spending his life with this ghost. He also notifies him that if a ghost loses its path, it turns into an evil spirit. That's why Young Min has to stay away from the ghosts. Meanwhile, the police detectives have a talk with Dr. Du, asking him why he believes Kim Jong attacked him. Well, that's easy to answer for the doc, who tells them that the male nurse is displeased because Du caught him stealing some drugs from the hospital. Before the detectives leave, Kim Hyun also informs them about the higher rates of death that the hospital is seeing lately. Later, Young Min sees his grandma working on the road. He takes her back home and asks her to quit this program, but his grandma is not going to do so, because they need the money to pay off their loan. The next morning, Young Min takes action and he visits the private investigator whom Ji-hyun had cornered in the past. The driver shows him the picture, but the investigator, Gu Bong, is not in the mood to elaborate. Since Young Min is not going to pay him or hire him, he kicks the boy out of his office. Once he is alone, Gu Bong recalls a visit he had from Rong-soo in the past. The officer had asked him about one of his clients, who asked him to take some weird pictures of people mourning their loved ones. Gu Bong told him back then that he could not reveal the details of his clients, but the reality is that he had no idea who was the person who was paying him for those pictures. Back in the present, Young Min visits So-ri at the hospital to ask her how Ji-hyun died. The nurse reveals that the girl was brought to the hospital unconscious and she was initially stabilized. However, her condition worsened suddenly and she died. When Young Min returns home, Ji-hyun tells him that this case is becoming increasingly complicated and she probably died while she was researching what happened to her best friend. Young Min takes her and they go back to the hospital, where Dr. Do sees the driver speaking on his own. After a brief encounter, Young Min continues investigating the hospital until the ghost of Ko Do appears. Ko Do was a police officer who died in this hospital, and he has been trapped in this world for 5 years. He asks Young Min to help him out in exchange for more information on the hospital and Kim Jong, the nurse who got fired. Ko Do's wish is to see his daughter one last time. When his daughter was young, Ko Do was working too much. In fact, he was so distant from her that his daughter grew to hate him and they lost all kinds of communication. Young Min agrees to help him out, but he is unable to find his daughter. The next morning, he spends some time with Ji Hyun, trying to help her materialize again, but that proves to be harder than they think. In the meantime, Ko Do believes that his old partner will have some information on his daughter. Coincidentally, his old partner is Hong Soo. Young Min sets up a meeting with him. As soon as Ji Hyun sees him, her heart starts aching. The driver asks her about it, but the ghost can't explain this feeling. In any case, Young Min tells Hong Soo that Ko Do had helped him in the past, and he just wants to let his daughter know how good of a person her father was. Hong Soo reveals that his daughter lives in the USA, but she is in Seoul for the weekend to give a presentation about future technology. Young Min finds her and is able to have a talk with her. He actually tells her about Ko Do being present, but since she is a scientist, she doesn't believe in any of that. However, a spotlight collapses while she is getting prepared for her next presentation, and Ko Do manages to save her before the lights crash her head. Now she is convinced and she believes that her father is present. The group meets with her again at her father's resting place. Young Min delivers her father's last words, and the woman forgives her father for being absent from her life, allowing him to transition to the next plane of existence. With that out of the way, and now that Kim Jong has become a main suspect, Young Min finds his apartment and his sister's ghost right outside of it. When they walk into the apartment, they see that his sister, Mi Jong, is dead. Even though she can't remember how she died, she proclaims that there is no chance her brother killed her. Young Min finds the pictures that the private investigator had taken for his unknown client, which would normally indicate that Kim Jong is to blame for so many deaths. On the other hand, Young Min believes this is way too obvious. If he was the killer, he would not just lay these pictures out in his room. Suddenly, Ji Hyun's form starts flickering and we see that she is not entirely dead but rather in a coma inside her own house, being guarded by her father. When she is stabilized, Kim Hyun appears and she calls the police on Young Min, but she also calls Dr. Do to notify him about Young Min's presence. A quick flashback shows us that Kim Hyun has known Do since he was a little kid. His grandfather used to abuse him, but the nurse, who was the boy's babysitter back then, stopped him from doing so by threatening him that she would call the police on him. Young Min is taken to jail for a few hours, but he is let go soon as there is no evidence of him killing Mi Jong. In fact, she has been dead for over a week. The police officers also inform him that the motorbike which ran over his mother was found, but Kim Jong is still free. As they are about to leave the police station, Ji Hyun sees a picture of hers with her father, helping her remember some more parts of her past. She used to be a policewoman working in the same department as her father. Young Min decides to meet with Hong Soo again, but he doesn't tell him that he is able to see his daughter. He shows him the picture of his mother with Ji Hyun and also tells him that his daughter was a friend of his, so he is very interested in uncovering the truth about her death. The driver also meets with Mi Jong again, who insists that her brother is a good person. She tells them that she used to do drugs, so that's why her brother stole those drugs from the hospital. Although it was wrong, he did it for her. Then, Mi Jong takes them to a big beautiful house where her brother might be hiding. She reveals that this house belongs to Kim Hyun, even though she is not getting paid enough money to afford it. She knows this information because her brother used to go fishing with her sometimes. While Young Min checks to see if there is somebody inside, Do watches him through the cameras of the house. Young Min shares this new information with Hong Soo, and they also find out that Kim Hyun grew up in an orphanage. Additionally, the previous owner of that large house was Do's grandfather. Hong Soo takes Young Min along to participate in the investigation, but he has to leave them for a little while, because one of his friends at the taxi company lost her mother, who is now revealed to be killed under Do's treatment. Do attends the funeral and pretends he feels bad about the woman's death, but Ji Hyun catches him smiling as a reflex. When Young Min walks outside, he is able to see the woman's ghost. He calls for his friend to come out and then tells her everything her mother wants to say. Although his friend faces him with some skepticism, she is convinced that her mother's ghost is present since Young Min is talking about details that he couldn't possibly be aware of. At the same time, the police detectives find Gu Bong dead in his office. However, they also find a picture Gu Bong had kept as collateral. It is a picture of a motorcycle with Daeho's emblem on it. This emblem is given to the nurses who graduate from Daeho's nursing school, and Kim Jong was not one of them. Kim Hyun meets with Do, and now the truth is revealed as she warns him that they need to stop because they might get caught. A flashback reveals that Kim Hyun eventually killed Do's grandfather because he was abusing the boy. Then, the two of them lived together and Do acquired everything that used to belong to his grandfather. Do decides to take action, and he visits Young Min's house under the pretext that he is bringing Bun Ja her medicine since she did not go to the hospital to get it. When Young Min goes to grab a drink for him, Do starts looking around the house, but Ji Hyun follows him and she notifies Young Min. The driver catches Do, and he decides to play his next card. In Kim Jong's apartment, Young Min had found a letter prompting Kim Jong to notify the writer of the letter if he needs any help. After meeting with Kim Hyun for some mind games, and after Ji Hyun gets some flashes of the past, Young Min goes to the hospital and uses the note to compare it to several writing characters. He realizes that the letters on the note are identical to Kim Hyun's writing style. Do sees So re-interacting with Young Min and asks her about it, but the girl refrains from telling him the truth because she let the young driver take a look at her files. A few moments later, the police come to the hospital with a warrant and prompt everybody to cooperate with their investigation. When Do leaves the hospital, he goes to a secluded location and plans to kill Kim Jong, who is tied up on the ground. Elsewhere, Ji Hyun is about to disappear again, but she stabilizes once more as the doctors take care of her real body, which means she is still alive. Young Min suggests that they have to act fast, and maybe they should throw a bait to Kim Hyun. Young Min visits her apartment, and not only he tells her that he knows about the note she wrote to Kim Jong, but he also shows her the picture of the motorcycle, telling her that he knows the motorcycle that hit his mother belongs to her. After telling her that he will bring her down, Young Min leaves the apartment, but as soon as he steps outside the building, he is hit with a bat and falls unconscious. When he wakes up, he is tied up on a chair near the dead body of Kim Jong. Do reveals that he is a twisted man, admitting that he has killed everyone. He tells Young Min that he enjoyed so much being adored by him for supposedly helping his mother, while in fact, he was the one who killed her. Do had paid the private investigator to take pictures of the people mourning their loved ones because he simply enjoys seeing others in pain. While Do pours gasoline around Young Min, a flashback shows us everything that happened on the day when Ji Hyun and the driver's mother died. That morning, Young Min had a fight with his mother because she was working long hours to pay off their loan. Then, he attended college because he was about to become a police officer as well, even though he quit after his mom's death. His mother, Kim Jin, drove Ji Hyun to an event and gave her her bracelet so she could appear more friendly. That day, Ji Hyun was investigating Kim Hyun because she suspected her and Do for her friend's death. She pretended to be her friend and had some drinks with her at her apartment, but Do knew her plan and tried to kill her. Ji Hyun fought back while Do was filming her agony on the phone Ji Hyun became connected to. With the phone in her hands, Ji Hyun made it to Kim Jin's taxi, but Do was following after her. Ji Hyun dropped the phone in the car when she fell unconscious in it. Kim Jin tried to take her away, but she was hit by Kim Hyun with a motorcycle. Do tried to finish Kim Jin, but since there were people around and Young Min came as well, he pretended to help her, and killed her later in the hospital. As everyone left the scene, including Young Min, Kim Hyun returned to steal the black box from the car. She disposed of Ji Hyun and also abandoned the taxi. Back in the present, Do tries to burn Young Min alive, but he is saved by the police. A short flashback shows us that Young Min had set up an app on his phone, making her Hong Soo able to track his location. Back home, Ji Hyun bursts into cries because she is devastated by the latest events, but she knows that they have to keep going. Her soul will not rest until Do pays for his crimes. Another flashback shows us that Do is responsible for Cole's death. He changed his prescription to a harmful one that made him dizzy and caused him to have an accident at work. Do is arrested by the police, but they don't have any credible proof that he is guilty. Young Min tries to trap him, but he ends up attacking him, as Do pretends to be the victim in this situation. Young Min and Ji Hyun agree to take the phone to a tech guy so they can retrieve the videos in it and use it as proof. But when they do, Ji Hyun starts disappearing, so they decide to stop the process. That night, Do installs a secret camera in Young Min's car. Later, the driver finds the ghost of Kim Jong. He recalls that Kim Hyun suggested to him to live in her big house and lay low for a little while. She also promised that she would take care of his sister, but she killed her instead. Kim Jong becomes mad and he is on the brink of becoming an evil spirit, but his sister grounds him and pleads with him to stay with her. Kim Jong tells Young Min that he has a secret recording of his conversation with Kim Hyun in the old house of his parents. Then, he and his sister transition. Young Min finds this recording in Do's secret camera, but since he is not aware of Do's location, he decides to visit Kim Hyun with the phone to scare her. Then, he waits for her to leave the house and follows her. The former nurse takes him right to Do's location. The two of them start fighting, until Do gets hold of the phone. Now that he touches it, he is able to see Ji Hyun. Do burns the phone, killing Ji Hyun, and getting rid of the evidence against him. However, Ji Hyun's soul returns to her body, while the police arrest Do. Young Min is disappointed, but Hong Soo visits him and tells him that his daughter is alive. Somebody had tried to kill her in the hospital, so he transferred her home and hired his own doctors. Hong Soo takes Young Min to the love of his life, and she wakes up as they touch hands. In the meantime, Do is being interrogated by the detectives, but he is left to go when Kim Hyun walks inside the police station, falsely confessing that she was the one who committed all the murders they are blaming on Do. With that action, Do is set free while Kim Hyun is imprisoned. That night in prison, Kim Hyun decides to commit the unthinkable. Everyone is annoyed about the fact that Do is free, so they come up with a plan. When Do returns to the hospital, So-ri informs him that Ji Hyun is a patient again because she has survived somehow, even though everyone thought she was dead. Do thinks he has the chance to finish her off once and for all, but Young Min intervenes and stops him along with the police. Do takes So-ri as a hostage and he makes it to his car. Do is able to drive away, but Young Min is the one who finally stops him even though the doctor was able to evade the police. Do threatens to end himself, but Young Min disarms him and tells him that he will not allow him to die this easily. He has to pay for his crimes. Now that everything has fallen into place, Young Min and Ji Hyun are finally able to date each other for real and share their first kiss. Dr. Do ends up in prison, and on his first night, he is visited by 3 evil spirits that have been waiting to get their vengeance on him. The next day, Ji Hyun reports for duty, but the chief gives her a day off to get some rest. Young Min uses that opportunity to date her again and introduce her to his friends. Finally, Young Min finds the ghost of his mother and the two of them reconcile. Young Min apologizes to her for blaming her that morning, and Ji Hyun apologizes for being the reason she is dead. Kim Jin forgives both of them and wishes them a happy life before she transitions. Finally, the young couple decides to continue working with ghosts. One night, they find a female ghost, but Ji Hyun is not able to see her since she is just a normal human now. In any case, the woman says she can pay them by taking them to a bag of money that some gangsters have hidden in a secret spot. With that, Young Min starts driving,